Podcast or Vets I Recommend. I'm really excited, as always, when we have our next guest on here because she's just so insightful and so compassionate and understanding of, kind of what we go through with our pets. And she's been working with animals for so long. So, Dr. Barry Sands, thank you so much again for being here and giving your knowledge and time to us and your expertise. Welcome.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you having me here, and I appreciate the opportunity to reach out and, have a conversation.
Yeah, that's what it is. We just we the more we talk, the more we educate, the more change comes and things. And there's so much that encompasses when we're working with people and animals and in the communication gaps, right? Because we don't have language. And so we need people who are more experienced veterinarians and technicians and dog trainers and dog groomers who experience it a lot more, because a lot of times, people can go through their whole life and maybe experience 5 or 6 dogs or 5 or 6 cats. And so it's really hard, right, to kind of know what the right thing is to do because you've only had that experience a few times and you're not an animal, where it's different when you experience it with yourself, but you don't know how animals feel. So I love that the vets that I recommend are so free with your time to come on here and help people have a better understanding, because I know the struggle that pet parents go through, because they just have these few animals, and some people it's their first animal. They've never had an animal before.
Right.
And so they have to go through it. So for our listeners, I always talk to the guests that I bring on here a little bit before we come on, and we just kind of discuss about things that we want to talk about. Of course, this is time for you to come on and ask questions that you're, burning and need to know. But also, we usually pick something that we want to talk about in between. And so, before the show, Dr. Barry Sands said, what do you want to talk about? And most of the reason why I haven't been on here the last couple of weeks is because my brother passed away. I am being very honest and open and forthright about how he passed away. My brother committed suicide. So of course, death is something that is around me right now, and I'm dealing with the grieving process and the guilt that comes along with suicide. And Dr. Barry Sands said, are you going to be comfortable talking about death? Because it's something that we all face with our animals. And I said, absolutely, let's do it. It might actually help me. I never know, because the grieving process is very similar, whether you lose an animal. And for some people, the animal is their best friend and their only friend. And so that grieving process can be, in some cases, even worse, I think, than losing somebody that they never see or have any connection with. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and kind of help you guys, because it's almost inevitable that if you have a pet, at some point you're going to have to go through that process. And so let's kind of dive in. If you have any questions, one of the questions I have for you, Dr. Sands, is how do you respond to people? Just as a vet tech, I remember getting questions about how do you know when the time is to, do we put our animals to sleep? Do we let them pass on their own? How do you answer that question when people have that for you?
Well, I mean, before we dive into that specific answer, I think to just broaden the topic a little bit about the concept of death, because I feel that it is it's a place where many are afraid to go. When we talk about our own mortalities and the lack of our lives as we transition into a place that is virtually seemingly unknown, there's a lot of fear that gets built up around the concept of death and dying. Whether you're a human or an animal, we have this, I'm going to call it fear, because I think that's what we see. That's what I'm seeing all the time. It's that unknown, that uncertainty that we have around the experience, that we put all of our fears into that. And so I want to kind of demystify the concept of death, where that just as we are all energetic beings, there's an animation of a body, which is what we call life. And then there's the lack of animation, or the lack of a life force that's within the body, that we call death. And there's an ultimate choice that I feel that we all need to make is, do we want to live, or do we want to die? And if we make the choice to live, well, then it behooves us to just live and live fully and live mindfully and joyfully as best as we can. And if the choice is, to transition or to die, well, then do that with grace and honor and make that, we make decisions. And, I'm not going to touch upon, the ways we choose to die and whatnot. That's not quite where I wanted to go with this. But um, when you have an animal that's sick and the client comes to you and says, well, he's really sick and I don't know, when will I know? Right? The question around that is an action that we are going to take to put them to sleep, as opposed to sometimes allowing them to die the way they're going to die. And sometimes the animals will just die on their own when they're done. Sometimes they're in a situation where it is best that we make the choice to help them transition in a way that reserves their dignity, ends their suffering, and it becomes more peaceful. So there's a lot of different ways to approach that. In essence, when it comes to making a decision to put your animal to sleep, virtually the choice that we make is around the end of their suffering and our perception of what that suffering is. And some people, it's a decision based upon, my dog can't get up anymore. Or it's based upon, the animal is not eating anymore, or they seem unhappy. They're not engaged in our environment with each other. So I think it's a variety of things. I don't think it's a cut and dry question. Or say black and white. I feel that people they know their animals, and I empower them to just tune in to their own hearts and ask the questions. Are you happy? Do you want to go? And listen with the ears that are on your heart and not the ears that are connected to your head, and just see what they say and get that sense of them. And then if it's not clear, then you ask them to be clear. Please help me see that in a way that I can understand.
Yeah. I had I've shared this, I think, before, but I had a bulldog who is the reason why my logo has a bulldog on there, is because of a dog I had named Millie, and she got a little tumor on her liver. And I struggled like everybody does, like, when is it time? And should I let her go? And should I let it pass? And I struggled. I couldn't on my own make that decision. So I actually called somebody who is an animal communicator. And, regardless of how anyone feels about that, it was something I needed to do that made me feel like someone can help me, maybe someone else can help me get this decision. And so she talked to Millie, and we asked her a lot of questions. I mean, she asked her so many questions, and I obviously don't know what, I can't say for sure. I'm not someone that was completely like, oh yeah, this is it. But it made me feel really good about my decision when this communicator was able to tell me what Millie wanted and when she felt it was time. And I think I deep down knew it was time. I was just scared to make that decision. So what was interesting about it is when the animal communicator was talking to her, Millie was saying now, like she knew it wasn't like I was feeling this need to have her put down. And then the communicator comes on and says, oh, Millie says she's got years. As soon as she tapped into her, she said, she would really she's got like a day or two that she could go and would like to say goodbye to her friends. And so it made me feel good about the decision. But I think intuitively, I already knew. You know what I mean? Like, I already had this connection with Millie. And that's why I was seeking somebody else's approval, which is, kind of my personality anyway, always seeking someone else's approval. I always second guess my decisions. And so that wasn't one that I also didn't second guess. So, I'm not against you. Sometimes those help. So sometimes that extra person bringing them into the mix and talking to them, sometimes you just talk yourself right into what you already know. just
Right.
because I hear it.
Right. Well, I as veterinarians, we euthanasia or transitioning life is a part of our existence. We
Yeah.
do that on many levels, in different ways, in different forms, and it's not something that someone who owns a pet or beloved animal readily makes that decision easily. You are making a decision to take a life, and that is not an easy decision to make. And so getting that permission from the animal, or from the veterinarian, a lot of people will seek out their vet to ask them, hey, do you think it's time?
Yeah.
you know and I also come across, on the flip side of that, I come across animals that people want to put to sleep for a variety of reasons that just aren't in alignment with their own lifestyles,
Yep.
or their animals are now becoming an inconvenience, or they have their own projections of their issues that they are sort of anthropomorphizing into the situation, where they feel that the dog is suffering when they're not really
Yeah.
suffering. They put their own fears onto them.
I just fairly recently had a really good dog client of mine that boarded with me quite often, so I knew him very well. And he was getting a little old, and hi Billy, he stayed with me, and then, honest to God, a week later, the dad called me and told me that he had to put him down, and I was dumbfounded. I said, "What happened?" And he says, "Well, he can't chase his ball anymore." And then as he kept talking, he said they moved and they now have stairs. And exactly what you're saying, I thought, oh my gosh, he did this for convenience. He doesn't want to have to carry his dog up and down the stairs anymore. And I mean, it was just heartbreaking. But as a veterinarian, how do you approach that? I mean, have you ever been able to just tell someone, no, I'm sorry, I can't?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are random people that just show up to the ER because all they want to do is have us put the dog to sleep, and we need to um, approve that. We need to, usually, if it's his 20-year-old cat, he's not eating, he's a skeleton of his existence, and mom just wants to have a good ending.
Right.
Absolutely, we're going to help her with that. I had a case that did come in that I said no to. It was an old Chihuahua that the guy thought he was in intense pain and needed to put him to sleep. And I was like, well, the way it was conversed to me, it sounds like, oh, well, if the dog is in a lot of pain and he's not walking and he's really old, when sure, maybe this is the time. And so they bring the animal back and to the treatment room, and this little dog is happy, wagging his tail, walking around, smiling at me. And I'm like, I will not put this dog to sleep. I won't. And
Yeah.
so then I had a conversation with the owner, and I was like, what's going on? Maybe we can help this. And
Yeah.
so we ended up not putting the dog to sleep. He ended up having some back pain that was weird, a weird neurologic situation. And uh, I gave him some pain medications. I actually started doing some acupuncture on him, and doing some other holistic therapies. And he's still with us today. And
Aw.
yeah, and he's going on his walks, and he's doing his thing. And what I was able to do is show the owner that what he's experiencing is not pain.
Yeah.
And so that was just and I had to sort of show him, this is what your dog is doing, and that's not a pain response. And because that, once again, the fears of the owner is like, oh my God, I don't know what's going on. He must be suffering. This is terrible. And
Right.
it's a very reactive situation without getting counseling. And he did say he got counseled from his other veterinarians, and they, at some point, they mentioned that, oh yeah, he has back disease, and it's going to just get worse and progress, and then it's going to be horrible for him. And
Mhm.
so they painted already, as they seeded a bad picture in his mind.
Right. Right.
So I mean, so I kind of talked him through that, and so far the little dog is still with us. you
It's
know
why, there's so many stories like that where I'm such an advocate for second and third opinions, because there's just, I mean, this dog could have lost his life based on what somebody else and I'm not saying that that vet was a bad vet. It just might have been the wrong decision too soon. Uh,
Right.
and then I've also seen it the other way. I worked for a really horrible veterinarian for a really long time. And he would, in my opinion, drag dogs through so much because he could extract money out of the client. And he did that on a number of occasions where I thought, I can't believe he's letting this keep going, and this poor animal was suffering. So I was really young and didn't know how to handle it, but I was smart enough to know, in one particular case, it was a poodle that had to come in 3 times a week to get IV fluids. She was like 17, 18 years old, and it was just awful. It was awful to watch. And it was an older couple, and it was just the love of their life, and they didn't want to let her go. And I really think that dog suffered for a long time so that this vet could get money. He was just an awful vet.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I've seen owners that are so pathologically attached that no, they will not let
Yeah.
these animals go.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. I've
so
seen
there's such a big spectrum of levels of wherever this is.
Yeah.
And it all comes down to, how we view life, how we view death, what we're holding on to. And
Yeah.
it's interesting that some of our these dogs, they know the relationship with their owners. They
Mhm.
completely understand that. So I have had cases where, the old dog is being watched by a pet sitter because the owners had to go away on business or vacation, something. And then that's the time the dog decides to come into the ER and go into crisis,
Yep.
because they know that if the owner was around, they would not let them go.
Yeah.
And so there's times where animals will die when the owners are not there.
That's,
Um,
that's so interesting. Being a boarding facility, I often have my older dogs have issues at the boarding facility. And I've always attributed it to the fact that, because I tell all of my clients, especially my old dog clients, the best place for your dog when you're on vacation is at your home. And I'm a boarding facility. And I will say that because I know that stress can bring on conditions and it can do a lot of stuff. And just being in a boarding facility is stressful. It's not home, it's not you.
yeah.
But interestingly, the older dogs, we just had a case. This poor woman, God bless her, she was just such an awesome woman. But she had an old poodle, 16 years old, and first time she's ever boarded the dog, first time she's ever gone away. She never wanted to leave the dog ever, but she had this opportunity and she wanted to take it. So she chose us as her boarding facility. And about a week into it, she stopped not being interested in her food, and we took her in, and she ended up staying 3 nights at the emergency room, and they ultimately couldn't really figure out what was wrong with her. And then by the time she got home, I mean, it just went on and on and on and on. And now she's having seizures and all of this, but she's still going. Her mom just keeps taking her and trying to, do, and I'm not going to say whether that's right or wrong for her to do. Um, but it's interesting that it happens at our facility, because I never thought about it from that perspective, that maybe that's why it's happening there,
Yeah.
because it's where they know they can pass and they're not going to have to. We had a case, not to keep giving all these cases, but this one's very interesting. I had a dog named Rocky. He was a King Charles Cavalier, coming to me since he was a puppy. And we've been around for a long time. So I have some really old dogs. So Rocky gets to the point where I'm really feeling like it's time. Like he probably needs to be let go. For religious purposes, the family will not euthanize. He has to pass on his own. And so he continues to come in to get his baths and board with us. And each time I'm just devastated watching this go on. But I understand the religious purposes, so I never bring it up or say anything. And then one day she calls us and says they finally decided they're going to go ahead and do it. So they make an appointment with the veterinarian, but ask if we would just bathe Rocky before he passes so he would be clean when he enters into the next life. That was their belief as well. So I said, yes, go ahead, bring him over. The appointment for him was at 3:00 for the vet to have him put down. They had something they had to do during the day, so we were going to put him in the tub at 1:00 to make sure he was dried and ready for them at 3:00. He passed at 12:30 at my
Mm.
at my facility. At 12:30, he passed. And he hated his bath. So we, I said, he was
Yeah.
like, no way.
It was like,
I'm going to go today, but I am not going after a bath. Like I'm skipping the bath. At
yeah.
12:30, he passed. I called his mom. He went into respiratory distress and he passed very quickly. He passed very quickly once he started, the breathing issue. I tried to get her down there, but it's interesting because, he had a scheduled appointment at 3:00 and he passed and he
Yeah.
passed.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, it's, they know, they have such an awareness, a deep awareness from other energies and other realms, multidimensionalities through space and time and all of that. They have this other awareness that they're kind of tapped into, and we tap into that as well on occasion. I had a case. It was one of the most beautiful moments that I've had in my career, where there was a 6-month-old puppy who the mom just had just recently. She only got him. She's had him for a couple of months, and she's already obviously fell in love, with the dog. And so, dog got hit by a car, and he had brain trauma, and to the point where he was on a ventilator. And we had him on a ventilator, and we had his body completely stabilized. His blood pressure was perfect. His heart rate was great. Body temperature. The only thing that we were doing is breathing for him. And so the question is, he's almost like in a coma, and the question is, well, how long do you keep a dog in a coma for? And so that question, the answer sometimes lends itself to, well, how financially feasible is that? I mean, in people, they could be in comas for years, and we don't typically do that in our animal patients. So this little puppy was like this for about 2 days, and very static, very fine, nothing going on, mentally, no changes there. And so the morning of the third day, mom and I are across the table from the puppy, and she's asking me, well, how long should we do this? I was like, I don't know, as long as you need, as long as you want, as long as you can. I don't know the end point of this. And so she looked into her heart, and then she started bending over to her puppy, and she had a conversation with the puppy. And she said, how much she loved him, and what a gift he was, and all the blessings that in his short life and time with her that she, has gotten from him. And if he wanted to go, it was okay. And as soon as she gave him permission, I kid you not, this perfect EKG just went flatlined.
Wow.
And then I felt this little whooshy thing, as I normally do when animals transition. I just feel that energy just kind of go through me. And it was beautiful. And then, I was like, look, he's gone. He just left. And then, then she's crying, I'm crying, we're all crying. And it was a beautiful moment and a perfect example of just giving permission and how much they hold on for us, to let them know it's okay to go. And then he passed. And that was just beautiful. Really,
that is so amazing on so many levels, right? That they can hear us, that they understand us, that they're listening, that, I mean, we often think that our animals don't communicate verbally with us in the language, but they understand our language. I absolutely, they may not be able to speak our language, but they understand our language. I'm absolutely positive of that. And that's such a, gosh, I hope that's in one of, and I know I have one of your books. That story is amazing to think that it's actually like proof, kind of, like it's that if it happens at that exact moment when for 2 days he's been fine, I am just going to let my husband in. For all of you, I am staying in a hotel because my mom has COVID. So hold on one second. And my husband just got home from work, so I told him, just tap on the door lightly. I'll let you in because whatever. Anyway, so oh gosh, I have chills. Honestly, that story is when I started this, we talked about how I'm dealing with a very recent death in my family, and So of course I'm questioning, do we have signs from afterlife and those kind of things? Has anyone ever shared that with you with animals leaving messages after death? Have you ever experienced any of that?
Oh yeah, and it depends on the animal. It depends on the bond. Some of these animals will definitely hang around for a little while,
Yeah.
and you usually see them from that sort of weird in between vision of like the periphery. It may like all of a sudden catch your eye and like, oh, I just saw my dog just run across the hallway, right? And so people have said yes, I've seen that. Some animals will come into your dreams. Um, I had a client of mine who's had a cat named Penny that she was, they adored each other, and Penny passed on, and um, every once in a while, mom would see these random pennies in these bizarre places just show up, like
Oh, wow.
materialize. And she'd be like, yeah, I know she's there talking to me and giving me support and love. And from the beyond. And we think that death is an end, and it's not. And I can tell you that on the other side of that veil is an exquisite place where there is nothing but love as this entire frequency. And it's not all those that transition, whether it's our pets or it's these our humans. What they want for the people that survive is to always, is to not be so sad, and to be able to move on knowing that they are loved and they did the best they could, and no judgment, no blame. We are the ones that the survivors are the ones that always beat ourselves up, you know and we're constantly like people that put their animals to sleep. Oh, did I make the right decision? Should I have waited? Did I wait too long? Was I What if I would have done something differently 4 years ago? Could I have prevented this moment in time? And in the conversations and the self-talk that goes on is endless. And it's not necessary. It truly isn't. What we need to do is really embrace the concept of living from our hearts, the fullness that we can, um, and mm, and being okay with who we are and the decisions that we make along the way. Because most of us, we make our decisions and we do the things we do from the consciousness that we know in that moment. And we do the best we can. And there may be an awareness at another time. It's like, oh well, next time I'll do something differently. Well, and that's growth, and that's our journey,
Yeah.
And I've had
Yeah.
many people say that they waited too long to put their animals to sleep and watch them suffer and decay, in
Yeah.
the ways that they do in illness.
Yeah. And they don't do that again. I recently had a client, she had a dog with cancer, and she did chemo, and she just this dog was a really, really amazing animal. And he had the capability, I don't care who you were, you could be a person that hated dogs, and this dog would make you love him. He was an amazing dog. And to this day I think about him because he was such a special animal. And so when he got cancer, it was really hard for her to let him go. And it was even me, he wasn't my dog, and I'm like, yeah, let's like don't let him go. He was just that amazing, and he brought so much joy to us. But she did the chemo, and he suffered, and he went through a lot of pain, and ultimately ended up losing his life. And that chemo never made him better. It made him, and I'm not here to advocate for or against. I'm just saying in this case, it never helped this dog. And so
Yeah.
he suffered for a long time. And then she got another dog years later, and unfortunately, that dog ended up with cancer. And she did not go that route again. She says, "I will not do what I did with him." And so, it's hard because you also don't know. It was a different kind of a cancer. That second dog got cancer at a different age. But what you're talking about is it hits home for me right now very much so, given my situation, even though it's my brother and not a dog. But we only know what we know at that time. So when we go back, like I'm trying to not do that to myself because I made some decisions leading up to my brother's death that, of course, I'm putting on myself. But my husband, thank God, is constantly reminding me, well, you didn't know that then. You didn't know this then, and that happens a lot with our animals.
Yeah. Well, people ask me, do you in my holistic practice, do you treat cancer? And I'm like, no, I treat animals who have cancer.
That's a good, it's a good way to say it.
Yeah.
Because
Because interestingly, when I meet a lot of dogs on the emergency service that are acutely diagnosed with cancer. A lot of them come in, say, with a hemoabdomen, where they bleed into their abdomen from a tumor that's usually maybe associated with the spleen, like a mass on the spleen or a mass on the liver that started to bleed. And so the owners noticed it because the dog collapsed or was in crisis or panting, and they rush him to the ER. And then we see this happens. And so then we have this talk about cancer with the clients or the owners. And it's important to remember that that mass that has been sitting there on the spleen or the liver has been there. It was there 2 weeks ago. It was there when he was running at the beach. It was there when you were out playing in the park.
right.
It was there. Your dog had the mass. So he already had the cancer. The reason why you've noticed it is because it bled, right? And it caused some hemodynamic problems where they got weak and blood pressure drops. So it became more noticeable. So just because you've seen it at that moment in time doesn't mean that it's a death sentence in that moment.
Yeah.
There are ways that we can help them, stop the bleeding and feel better and get them to live, through the however long it is until it's not. And it could be months, it could be years, depending on what route you take and what supplements or therapies you start instituting.
Yeah.
So just because you have diagnosed with cancer doesn't make the expiration date that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's so shocking to hear it. And we're hearing it. I know for me, just, we don't have veterinary medicine at my place, but we have a lot of animals that come younger and younger, animals getting diagnosed with some pretty horrible cancers.
Yeah.
I had a client a few years back and her dog got diagnosed with cancer. And I remember her coming to me and she says, look, I don't think I want to go down the route of doing chemotherapy. And the veterinarian she was seeing wanted to do a whole bunch of treatments for cancer. And she says, but I don't want to do nothing. So I think I'm going to change the diet, try a few supplements. Can you give me some stuff, to maybe try? And so we switched the dog over to a species appropriate diet, got rid of all the sugars and the junk food and stuff. And she would come in and she would always buy the smallest amount. Now, she had a big golden retriever, but she would always buy the smallest amount because according to her veterinarian, this dog didn't have more than 6 months to live. So she would buy these small amounts. And then I remember one time she came in and she said, it's been a year and I think I should maybe buy more because I'm spending a lot of money. And the dog was doing really, really well. And really all she did was change the diet. It didn't get rid of the cancer.
Right.
It just made her dog, I think the other aspects of what was going on with the dog, the poor diet and other stuff she was doing, had other effects on this. And so it was just really interesting. Anyway, that dog ended up living almost 2.5 years past when it got diagnosed. So it was pretty amazing.
Right.
Really,
I mean, cancer is it's sort of like there's a lot of reasons or suspicions and ideas of why cancer shows up in the first place, from energetic ideas to toxins and parasites and other viruses that may cause it. There's a lot of reasons that it can occur in the system. And that in regard, there's also a lot of ways that you can help the body coexist with this mass. Really, about when it comes to cancer, the two things you want it not to do, you don't want it to grow and you don't want it to spread.
right.
If it can sit there as an isolated thing in its own right, not bothering anybody, and then the rest of the body kind of goes along its business, well, that's a perfect thing. I had a client who had 14-year-old Rhodesian Ridgeback, big dog. And this lady, she was old. She was like in her 80s. And so to have this dog be able to walk and move around was really important for her. And she, when I met the dog, it was limping, but it was also riddled with cancer. It had lipomas everywhere on the outside. It had masses on the inside, and she didn't want the dog to go. And so we instituted all this integrative holistic therapies, new diets, detoxification, plant medicine, acupuncture, all sorts of things. And the dog lived another 14 months. You know, now you're having a 16-year-old Rhodesian Ridgeback riddled with cancer. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
those guys don't. They're big dogs. They're huge. That's yeah. See, I don't know. Lily had a question. Where was it? Oh, she said she heard that ivermectin helps with cancer. Have you heard that or know anything about that?
you know, I don't know all the details around that, but I think that statement was discussed as a means to relate the fact that some cancers and the formation of cancers are related to little parasites that grow. And so in of a sense that yes, that will help. I mean, ivermectin is becoming, you know, in those last 2 years, it's been this wonder drug that has been coming up that has all these beautiful antiviral, antiparasitic, you know, and such, you know, possibly anti-cancer effects. So
That's interesting. Yeah, she says for a parasite cleanse. I didn't see that yet, Lily. Yeah, it's interesting how, I mean, that stuff's been around for, I mean, I've been that's been around forever. Like, we've
yeah,
used that as long as I've been 37 years. I've been using
extremely
it.
safe, you know, for the
We
most
used to
part.
use it for mange was like the main thing we would use it for was for mange.
Mhm.
And now I'm seeing it for so many different things. So it's interesting. Lisa, this is such a amazing story. I'm going to just read it in case someone else. She says, my Cocker Spaniel Maisie passed of cancer at home with my mom when on a rare family vacation. My mom was sitting her. I learned as I approached the airport and saw a dog from in the clouds right then. Since then, I've always looked at the clouds or other elements of nature and seems to feel loved once ones appear. I've never thought about looking at the clouds for that, but I'm gonna try that. An anomaly for me. Have a glimpse, and loved ones are signaling that they are at peace and here in spirit. I love that stuff, and it's super helpful for me right now because I am seeking that so much right now. And I said when we talking about death right now and our animals that I hope I can get through it without crying. I've teared up so many times hearing stories that give us that feeling that they're still there. I know for sure my dog, I just know my dog's gonna, I don't want to say haunt, that's not the word I want to use, but I know my dog can't leave my side as it is. I can't imagine the afterlife. So I'm sure I'm gonna hear my dog barking. And I have 2 dogs. My other dog probably will be happy to get away from me. She's just a different kind of a dog, but my other one, Nevada's my golden, and if you have a ball, she could care less about me. So she's like off, but my little one is pretty attached to me. Dogs do go to heaven. Look for the portal in the clouds. Oh,
Yeah, all dogs go to heaven. There's a cartoon about that. It's true.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It has
all animals, everybody does. Honestly, it's not just
yeah,
animals, it's everybody.
yeah,
And heaven, Shangri-La, these wonderful places. And really, just like Einstein said, energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It just changes form. So we're always transitioning through all these different frequencies. And it's really our perception and our hearts and the meanings that we give it. And when we lose an animal or we lose a person in our lives, we lose a piece of ourselves, around that. And we miss what we miss more is the idea of that energy not being in our tangible realms.
yeah.
We can't have a verbal conversation. We can't hold them or touch them or smell them, and use our three-dimensional senses to experience them. But when they transition, there are other ways that we can communicate in those non-tangible ways, those extrasensory perceptions, and in our dreams.
Yeah.
I've had many of my family and animals that have passed that have always that come into my dreams, and we have interactions on that level until it's either, we either say goodbye, or we just intermittently visit.
Yeah. I think it's hard. Like, I've lost humans in my life, and I've lost animals, cats and dogs in my life. My cat of 20 something years passed away not too long ago also. But I think with animals, it there is always that guilt. Every animal I have ever had, I have had guilt, but I've had two brothers pass away. One was from suicide, so I've got some guilt that's sitting on me right now. But my other brother didn't pass away from suicide, so there wasn't any guilt with my other brother. But with animals, every animal that has ever passed, I've always felt a sense of guilt. Should I have done this? Could I have done that? Why didn't I do that? Because we are responsible for what we put in their mouth, what we put in their body, how many walks they
Right.
get. We have all of the care is in our control. So I think when our animals pass, we always have to deal with the guilt. My cat, for example, I still feel like I should have pushed her further into eating better. She was really hard to transition her. So I had her for a long time before I started. Like I said, she was 21 years old, and I really started learning more about not I species appropriate diet, raw diet. I started learning more around the 15-year mark. So she was already probably about 5, 6 years when I was really starting to go, oh my gosh, there is no such thing as a better kibble. Like, because for a long time, because most of you who are listening know I came from the vet world. So I thought science diet was the greatest thing that ever walked the face of the earth. And then I realized it wasn't, but then I thought kibble was better. So when my kitty passed, I was having a lot of guilt that I should have pushed her more, because she really did not want to eat a raw diet. She would eat the freeze dried, but it was really hard to get her to eat like organ meat, where I would just give her like some liver. And I mean, I really had to mess with her to get her to eat anything. So I had that guilt that I didn't try harder. And she was 21 years old.
Yeah.
And I still,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, and that's the thing about human emotions and how we put that on. My grandmother used to say that guilt is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it doesn't get you anywhere.
ooh,
And it's an energy of, it's self-beating, you know. We are so judgmental of ourselves and our own experiences that it's time to kind of shift and move through that and out of that, where we have a lot more compassion and for ourselves, because it doesn't had you have um, sought out information from your vet, right? Say you went, you wanted to do the best you could with your cat, and you went to an authority figure that you trusted, and they gave you slightly maybe misinformation, right? But you listened to them because they knew,
right.
right? And so you're doing what they told you to do. And so it may not have, maybe they said, oh, the cat has to be on a KD dry kibble because he has kidney disease.
Yeah.
A lot of vets will say that, but that's not a good thing. It's not a good diet for a cat in kidney failure,
Right.
right? So nowadays, I feel like with the plethora of information that we have, and the more and more ideas that we have, and knowledge around holistic medicine, functional medicine, other alternatives of care, it's easy enough to seek out more information and get, start afresh and start with, like you said, find more opinions, and more trusted resources of how to go forth. And you know what? If your little old cranky cat, all it wants to do is eat that dry kibble and it won't eat anything else, well, bless the kibble. And hope that this cat is going to do what it'll nourish that little body as best as it can, because
Yeah.
cats are hard, they eat what they eat, and and it
She
doesn't make
was,
any sense beating yourself up about it because you couldn't get the raw food, high moisture, species appropriate diet into this cat,
yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
But I'll tell you, like we talk about, when you know more, you do more. It would be different So I have 3 kitties right now who I bottle fed, and they went straight from raw goat's milk to raw diet. They've never had kibble, they've never had freeze dry. They just don't eat that stuff because I knew more, and so I never got them on a kibble. Whereas we always called my cat that passed away Garage Kitty because she was a very weird cat that would not come out of the garage. So her actual name was Stella, but over the years, she wouldn't come in the house. So I just started calling her Garage Kitty. But Garage Kitty was different. Her first 5 years of her life, she ate the best kibble there was. And, and then transitioning her, like you said, cats were really hard. I would get her to eat freeze dried, but that was it. But now my kitties they'll never have anything but raw diet. So, and we'll see. I keep telling my husband they're going to outlive us now, because if I can get a 21-year-old, if I can get a kitty to eat 5 years of kibble and then freeze dried, and she lived to be 21, these guys are, looking at outliving
Right.
me. They're going to outlive me at this point is what I'm hoping for. So, I want to find this. I just lost this question, or it wasn't a question, but I really like what Lisa said. She says, since there are so many opinions out there, finding I can only do my best or drive myself crazy. How are these? I feel so sad for all of us with so many different, really adamant opinions out there, and how, just like you said, that one dog, somebody said with the Chihuahua that you were talking about earlier in the show, how the Chihuahua, one vet is saying, this is going to be really bad and your dog's going to end up with all of this pain. And
Right.
that led you to have the dog put to sleep.
I feel like, honestly, I have yet to meet an integrative holistic practitioner that doesn't have a global view of overall wellness, where it comes to providing the best information that you can on many different levels to support health and to, gracefully pass. I feel that in the holistic world, there's a lot of good people out there to reach out to as a resource. And just in general, if you ever meet a practitioner on any level, whether it's a human practitioner or an animal practitioner, that says that their way is the only way, well, then that's just wrong.
Yeah.
I learn so much from every client I meet, every person I interact with. I'm just constantly getting more and more information of different ways.
Yeah.
So there's never one way to live, and there's never one way to die. And so there's just seek out those sources.
Yeah. I agree. And that's one of the things when I do this show and I'm introducing people to all of these vets that I recommend, is that a vet who says there's only one way is where because people will ask me, well, how do you know what the good vet is? Sometimes I only know what the bad vet is, which is the vet who is not open to differences in communicating with other vets. And to me, arrogance is something I try to stay away from, because like you're saying, there's so many different ways. There's not any one way. And if you have a vet who says there is only one way, then I know you need to go to a different vet. But sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you can have a great veterinarian who's great because the client and the vet have a good rapport together. And that same vet may seem bad to another person because the rapport with the owner isn't good, because it takes both, right? That connection for you to be able to communicate with each other, to try to communicate with the dog. So it's harder for me although I love all of the vets that I put on here, but it is hard for me to say this is a great vet. But there are certain things, like I find in you guys, being willing to be open and listen and learn and continually educating yourselves, I think is just so, so, so important. Lily says, and I'm real curious to hear what you say about this. Lily says that she knows somebody, used to be a veterinary technician, who gives ivermectin as a monthly. She gives a dose of it monthly as preventative. How do you feel about that?
I feel like we keep going to this conversation of ivermectin.
I know, but I'm like, oh, that's kind of scary.
Well, I mean, a heartworm, like HeartGuard, is a ivermectin-based medication. So yeah, you're giving them, But is there a study out there that dogs are on HeartGuard or ivermectin-based, heartworm preventative? Do they have less cancer than other dogs that aren't? I mean, I don't know. That would be a really interesting study retrospectively, because that used to be the only heartworm medication out there before all these other, products
Right.
showed up.
Right.
So, I think there's a lot of really good information on ivermectin out there. And there's a human doctor, I think his name is, I think it's Paul Rory, Rory. And he did a ton of research on ivermectin, especially during this year,
Yeah.
these last 2 years, and the amazing abilities it has to fight all sorts of things. So a lot of his information, if people wanted to just reach out and just Google him and find out, ivermectin and him, I'm sure lots of papers and information is going to come up around that. It's just, I think it's a great drug. I think it's a good medication to use for a lot of different things, for sure.
You don't think that being that it's antiviral, did you say antibacterial?
Parasitic.
Parasitic. Do you don't think that that would have being continually given have some effects on the microbiome as far as other organisms being killed off that we do need? Do you think that could harm?
I don't know.
Yeah.
My sense is that I don't believe it would, because it doesn't affect the microbiome. It's not
Okay.
an antibiotic. It doesn't kill the microorganisms.
Okay.
It works on a different level. So inherently, no.
No.
But I think honestly, my projection going forward in the human world, I think ivermectin is going to be coming more and more out into the forefront, and more people are going to be embracing it due to things, in relation to what's happening in the world right now.
Right. It's interesting. I'm going to start looking into it a little bit. What are your thoughts on annual blood work?
I think annual blood work is a good idea. I also the blood work that we do on an annual basis is very routine blood screenings. They are CBC, complete blood counts, white cells, red cells, the distribution of that, your platelets, and the chemistries that you have, which are good at checking for certain organ functions. However, that being said, I've had people ask me, "Can you diagnose cancer on blood work?" And I said yes. I said, if your animal is sick and the blood work is completely normal, your animal has cancer, which is counterintuitive to think. I mean, you would expect all of these numbers to be completely skewed, but there's a lot of different types of blood work to be run. We don't, at least in the holistic world, we do more nutritional profiles, antioxidative stress, checking in with the mitochondria and how they're, if you have enzyme deficiencies or vitamin deficiencies, those are very specific blood panels that are not routinely done in human medicine either. You'd have to go to a function medicine doctor to have those done. But those are the ones I think are probably even more important.
You brought up the mitochondria. That is interesting because when I've done, research on that, it talks a lot about certain vegetables and stuff for the mitochondria. Do you think that's the same in our dogs to be
Oh yeah.
eating? Yeah, for the mitochondria. What about cats? I mean, we hear so much about cats really are just main carnivores. Do you think when we're talking about the mitochondria, do you think that cats should be eating more veggies?
Yeah, I think, well, it's important. Cats, when you talk about carnivores, carnivores eat herbivores in general, right? So the cat who eats the mouse, or is eating the grasses and the insects. They're eating all the other stuff that's in their digestive system. So yeah, all of that is important. You can't just live when they're not meant to just live on as a carnivore. We always think of just meat,
Right.
but there's more to it than that. There's the sinews, the other tissues, the organs, the eyeballs, the brain, the collagen. Yeah, the fur that helps to kind of bulk things up and move things along to come out. It's a total body experience of nutrition.
Yeah. That's why I just did a nutrition consult with a woman this morning, and she was, in the beginning of our talk, very adamant about feeding her dog the same thing every day. She just wanted to have one diet and then just feed the dog the same thing every day. And
Right.
I explained to her how that is not something I would support. I think the dog needs so much more of a variety, just like
Right.
us. And once she understood, it's just that she's been taught that, you feed the kibble because it's complete and balanced. And she used
Right.
that over and over. I
Yeah.
need to make sure that the diet is complete and balanced. So I want to put together one and make it complete and balanced. And my personal view is there's no such thing. I can't have this one size fits all, complete and balanced. Here it is in a bowl and it'll work for your dog and every dog. So moving things along and changing things was, what
Right. Well, absolutely. And this is where we come into that question of kind of just intuitively tapping in and saying that, like, does this feel right? I feel like we need to start transitioning to a place where we trust ourselves. And when someone gives you information, whether it's a doctor or a banker or, a politician, I don't care who it is. If somebody gives you information and and you check in with yourself and it doesn't really sit right, then take a pause and, say, wait a minute, I don't know if that sounds really correct. You have a veterinarian that says, here's a bag of kibble, your dog needs to eat this and only this for the rest of its life. I mean, that to me is the most absurd statement I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
And people will believe it, and they'll do that because they're like, well, I don't know anything about dogs and he must know, he's a vet, so he must be right. But if you stop and take a step back and think about it, we are constantly changing. A puppy grows, right, into a big dog. The time of day changes. The night becomes day and the day becomes night. The seasons change. The world's changed. The planets move. The entire world is changing all the time. Why would the diet stay same? How is that? How is that a connection that you would make? Like, if your system is changing, why wouldn't you put in something different to help with the change?
Right.
You know,
Right. Well, yeah,
there's
just straight from the puppy drinking milk only to solids, right? That's a change. All of that stuff changes.
Yeah,
It's
it's
just,
important. Variety is the spice of life. It just
yeah,
is on all
yeah,
levels.
yeah. No, for sure. For sure. Um, there's a couple questions coming through.
Yes.
One was about urine therapy. Do you know anything about urine therapy? I guess she says they're using it in India.
No, I'm not aware of that, but I think it was Lily that also mentioned something. Oh yeah, about Jonathan Otto. I actually listened to him intermittently too, so I think, and he just had this big conversation about ivermectin use. So I think probably that's where she's stemming a lot of her questions from.
Yeah.
But no, I'm not familiar with urine therapy.
Yeah, I am not either. I'm now, of course, as soon as we get off here. What?
Right, but yeah, I'm gonna look it up. I'm gonna
You gotta
see
look
what.
it up. You can't, I just, that's one of the things I get so frustrated is that people hear something, and that's ridiculous, without even looking
Right,
at both sides and coming up with, well, does it make sense? I don't know. Maybe it does.
right.
Lisa, is there a study that shows longevity significantly increased by eating raw versus kibble versus plant-based only versus meat, etc.? I know that Tom, gosh dang it, I can't think of his last name. I actually had him on the podcast, and he's been doing some studies on raw versus kibble and longevity in
Oh,
particular.
no, for sure we know that.
Yeah.
We certainly know that eating a more nutritious, bioavailable, species appropriate diet, it will definitely give you longevity, and it will also give you ability to thrive through your life. You're going to live well longer.
Right.
And yeah, there are animals that can sustain themselves on kibble, but that isn't that doesn't mean they're going to live well. There's going to be these problems. And yeah, I think Karen Becker, and Rodney Habib, they've done a bunch of they haven't specifically done studies, but they have referenced a lot of studies, around that, and can
Yeah.
get a lot of information.
Yeah. I think in the Forever Dog, I think they reference a study that was done in Europe, particularly on kibble versus raw diet. Longevity is an interesting thing for me, because I think that when people talk about longevity, they think of it in terms of every dog living to be 25 years old. Let's just say that number. So longevity is every dog. But to me, I think longevity is a little bit different, because we don't know what genetic issues your dog would have been born with. So when I think of a raw diet, it's not every dog lives to a certain age. It's that
Right,
will help that individual dog live his best, longest life.
right,
So
right. And when we talk about that, the longevity factor and the science of epigenetics, it's very apparent that there's a lot of factors that goes into it, into the health and wellness of a being, and it's diet for sure. It
yeah,
is water, it's lifestyle effects, it's your thoughts, it's your beliefs, it's your emotions, the stuff that you're experiencing yourself, and the energies you're putting in on your animals. Do you how much toxins are you accumulating? Do you detox, frequently? Do you live by power lines and are flooded with electromagnetic frequencies? I mean, there's a lot of things that come into play,
right.
with that existence. And I think the more you know about mindful living, the better it is, and the more you can translate that into your animal. And
Yeah.
and you may have a perfect animal, in the prime of its life, and you have an unfortunate accident. They get hit by a truck and they die. Right? That ended their life very abruptly. Right? But they had a fantastic life up until that moment.
Yeah.
It's more of the value and that we can give the lives, the moments that we live, and not, what's that saying? It's the moments that take. It's not the moments that
I know what you're
um,
saying.
we
That take
the
your
breath
breath
that we
away.
take, but it's the moments that take our breath away.
Yeah. That's I love that one. Lori, thank you. So behind the scenes is my guru person, and she's just amazing. And she found Tom Gable. So he has some studies. He's been working on some studies of raw diet. His name's Tom Gable. We did a YouTube video, podcast with him. I couldn't remember his last name for the life of me, but he's pretty amazing, and he does a lot of research with wolves and all sorts of stuff. So there's some information there for
Awesome.
you guys. There was one question because I know we're coming up on our time, but this
Yeah.
is something that gets brought up a lot. But Lily wants to know what you think about oxalate stones in the urine. She says she feeds a homemade diet with vegetables. What do you think about that?
Oh, that's not an easy question to answer in a very short amount of time. Like, that's like an hour lecture, honestly, to learn about oxalates. The
Yeah.
oxalates are a very tricky stone to form, because there is a lot of reasons why they form. When calcium gets mobilized and gets put into the bladder to create these stones, there's a lot of it's pH dependent, it's diet dependent, it's water dependent. Sometimes it's the body's ability to filter all these nutrients. There are pretty good lists of oh yeah, thank you, Lily. Pierre Corey. She just put that up there.
Awesome. Thank you.
There is a really good list of vegetables that are high in oxalates in general, that I would just stay away from those. There are things like a lot of spinach is a cup of one of them, and there are certain that are okay. I would just go to that general list of what vegetables have the most oxalates in them, and then just don't use those.
Yeah.
I mean,
Sounds
as a quick answer to that question.
Yeah. It is hard to kind of understand all the differences. I know what you're saying, to try to explain something, how deep that can go into the
Yeah.
pH and all of that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, and asparagus is good. Asparagus is one of those low oxalate veggies.
yeah, asparagus. I had a dog many years ago, and she kept getting the stones and getting the stones and they wanted to put her on KD and do all of that kind of stuff. But then they put her on the KD. She still was getting it, still was getting it, still was getting it. And then she was going to put her to sleep. And I loved this dog. Her name was Bella. And I said, if you're going to put her to sleep, can I take her? Because she
Yeah.
was there. She was only getting put to sleep over these stones and these constant stones. And so she gave her to me, and I didn't get. It wasn't a full-time give. He says, "Fine, you take her for 6 months," and I did, and I fed her asparagus. And I tell you, that dog just thrived on that stuff, and she was just doing amazing. So I gave her back to the owner, and then a year later, I found out she put her to sleep. So I was pretty upset about it.
Yeah.
But I know that asparagus made such a difference in her. I mean, we were doing ultrasounds and everything, so it's pretty amazing what
Yeah.
diet.
And I have a clinic where people can make an appointment to come see me on my holistic practice. Otherwise, they can go on my website and they can book an online consultation,
Yeah,
to delve in
yeah.
more nutritionally with that.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say, because we are past our hour, and I try to keep you guys right at your hour, because I know that your time is valuable and you give it so freely to talk to people. But please make sure, guys, if you have more questions, you can contact Lori's put up everything for you to make sure that you can get a hold of Dr. Barry Sands. If you're going to be anywhere near the Orange County area, Dr. Sands and I are putting together a really fabulous expo that is on October 1st. You can contact there, and then you can actually come and meet Dr. Barry Sands in person there as well. That's going to be in Orange County. So there's all sorts of ways that you can connect with us and, just really, really help your animals. There's a lot of vets out there that say that they're holistic, but they're not quite where I think they should be. That's my personal view. But Dr. Sands is someone I trust 100%. I've sent you clients. I completely, when I say these are vets I recommend, I 100% recommend them and think that they can do wonders for you guys. So please reach out to them before you make a decision that may put you down a road that is harder, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes these vets, that I recommend will say to me, God, I wish I got this dog a year ago, because now we've done all of this and it's so much harder to backtrack. So this is why I bring these vets to you, because I want you to reach out to them. I know that they are not always real close to you. Dr. Barry Sands is down in the San Diego, California area, but they do consultations. So don't think just because Dr. Sands is in San Diego, she can't help you. You can they can send in their reports from their veterinarians, and hopefully you have a veterinarian that's willing to work with a holistic vet. Some are, some aren't. And you guys can do so much. I've seen so much happen through the consultation. So a lot can be done. So reach out to them. All of the information is there. It's always on my website too. So if you don't have it now, it's always available on my website. All of Dr. Barry Sands' stuff is there. So you could just go to the website and pick it up. So, all right. Any last words?
I just want to say, be well, and be. Thank you so much for everybody. And, it's wellness is a journey. Wellness is a choice. It's never too late. It just isn't. So
that is great advice. It's a choice. It's a journey, and it's never too late. I think those are just fabulous 3 things to take with us, not just for our animals, but for ourselves, right? It's a choice. It's a lifestyle. So, all right, everybody. Thank you so much. Lori, thank you. All of our listeners, what amazing questions and helping us too. I love that tonight we had so much help from the audience typing in. This is the information. This is why I do this show, because we have to share all of our information. I can't wait to go look up urine therapy. I'm learning more from you guys than we're teaching you. I can't wait to look up urine therapy. I'm really interested. So thank you, everybody, so much. And we will see you next week. Take care. Bye, Dr. Sands. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, Lori. Thank you.